I want you to think about um, the architecture of your last difficult negotiation.
Oh, that's a great word for it. Architecture.
Right, because we usually don't look at it that way. Not the emotional surface of it, like the raised voices or the stubborn
Or
silences.
the really hyper-specific details of whatever it was you were actually debating.
Exactly. I want you to strip all of that away and just look at the underlying skeletal structure of the interaction itself.
Which is incredibly hard to do when you're in the middle of it.
It really is. Whether you are like navigating a multi-billion-dollar corporate merger or you're locked in some high-stakes geopolitical standoff.
Or honestly, even just trying to establish terms with a local vendor for your small business.
Yeah, exactly. We tend to view our communications as these vast, open-ended landscapes with just infinite permutations.
We operate under this total illusion of endless possibility.
We really do. But the source material we are examining today for this deep dive, it entirely shatters that illusion.
Completely shatters it. It's actually a bit jarring when you first read it.
It is. It argues that the chaos we feel during a conflict is just a mirage, and that every single conflict of interest inevitably funnels into one of just 5 definitive structural realities.
5. That's it. It is a stark, almost cold view of human decision-making.
Cold is a good way to put it.
Yeah, the text we are analyzing today, it strips conflict resolution down to its absolute bare metal.
Bare metal, I like that.
It presents a theoretical framework that categorizes the endgame of literally any scenario where two parties possess diverging interests.
And what makes this source so compelling to me isn't just its brevity, but its ruthless pragmatism.
Right, it doesn't moralize.
Exactly. It doesn't sit there and lecture us about how we should communicate in some utopian society.
No, it maps the brutal mechanics of how power, psychology, and leverage actually operate in the real world.
So our mission for this deep dive is to fundamentally rewire how you, the listener, map out your daily communications.
Because once you see the matrix, you can't unsee it.
Totally. By internalizing these 5 structural paths, the goal is that you stop reacting to the emotional noise of the other person.
And you start managing the physics of the conversation itself.
Yes, the physics of it. It's the difference between being swept up in a current and, actually reading the hydrodynamic flow of the river.
That's a perfect analogy.
Thanks. So the text begins this mapping process by examining the most instinctual response for anyone operating under pressure.
Or anyone dealing with conflict aversion, honestly.
Right. And that is complete capitulation. The source describes this first option as, completely yielding to the other side.
Total surrender.
Total surrender. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, it drops a fascinating, incredibly dark caveat.
It really is quite dark.
It notes that even when you give the other side exactly what they demand, it often fails to satisfy them.
Which totally goes against our basic assumptions about keeping the peace.
Completely. In fact, the text explicitly asserts that total capitulation frequently triggers a desire in the opposing party to additionally kick us.
Okay, we really have to pause on that specific phrase.
Please do, because additionally kick us is wild.
It carries immense psychological density. It demands rigorous semantic analysis.
Like, why a kick?
Exactly. A kick, in this specific context, is not a defensive maneuver.
Right, you don't kick to block a punch.
No, it is an unprovoked display of dominance. It's an action taken against something that is already prostrate on the ground.
Oh, wow. So they're already down and you just decide to hit them anyway?
Precisely. The text is pointing toward a phenomenon that is actually very well documented in both evolutionary psychology and game theory.
Okay, lay it on me.
It's about the power vacuum created by the sudden removal of friction.
The removal of friction?
Yes. Think about it. When you enter a negotiation, there is an implicit contract of mutual resistance.
Like we both show up ready to tug on the rope.
Exactly. That resistance signifies that both parties possess boundaries, they possess value, and they possess agency.
Okay, I'm following.
When you completely yield, when you drop your end of the rope, you instantly evaporate that friction.
And what happens when the friction is gone?
You evaporate the respect that the friction generated.
Wait, really? Just by giving them what they want, you lose their respect?
Yes, because the absence of friction might make the victor feel unearned dominance. It completely inverts the conventional wisdom that yielding buys peace.
It's like playing a video game where you encounter a monster and you think, I'll just play dead so it leaves me alone.
But then the monster just keeps attacking your character anyway.
Right. Why on earth would giving someone exactly what they asked for make them want to punish you more?
Because now they want to see where the actual bottom is. They want to test the boundaries of your sudden formlessness.
Formlessness. That's a great way to describe it. We often see this mapped out in corporate environments, right?
Oh, absolutely. Constantly.
Particularly in those asymmetric client-vendor dynamics.
Give me an example.
So imagine a massive client demands this predatory discount and an impossible timeline from a smaller vendor.
A classic pressure test.
Right. And the vendor, terrified of losing this massive account, just immediately caves. They offer zero pushback.
They yield completely. Option 1.
Yes. And the conventional expectation is that the client will be thrilled. Oh, great, we got exactly what we wanted. The relationship will stabilize now.
But that is rarely what actually happens.
Exactly. Instead, the client immediately begins micromanaging the vendor.
Expanding the scope of work without additional pay.
Yep, scope creep. And treating the vendor's time with absolute contempt.
Because the vendor proved they have no boundaries to defend.
Right. The easy surrender didn't resolve the conflict at all. It merely established the vendor as a territory without borders.
Which practically invites infinite expansion from the client.
I mean, it's brutal, but you see it happen every day.
And that corporate dynamic scales perfectly to the geopolitical level as well.
Really? How so?
Historically, when a nation completely capitulates to the aggressive territorial demands of an adversarial state.
Like the diplomatic appeasements in the 1930s before World War II?
That is the perfect textbook example. The aggressor rarely stops and says, "Thank you, I am completely satisfied now."
Right. They just take Sudetenland and then keep marching.
Exactly. The capitulation is interpreted as a diagnostic test of resolve.
A diagnostic test. That's terrifying.
The aggressor subconsciously or even consciously calculates, well, if they surrendered point A without deploying any defensive resources, where is the actual bottom of their resolve?
Let's poke them again and see what happens.
Exactly. Let us apply pressure to point B to find out. The desire to additionally kick the yielding party is essentially an exploratory mechanism.
An exploratory mechanism used by power to map the boundaries of weakness.
You nailed it.
So I want to ask you, the listener, to just reflect on a time you caved completely just to keep the peace.
We've all done it.
Yeah, we have. Did it actually bring peace, or did it just invite further demands down the line?
Almost always the latter.
So the total illusion of this first option is that surrender equates to safety. The source is just brutally dismantling that idea.
Surrender only equates to safety if you are dealing with a completely benevolent, self-regulating entity.
Which, spoiler alert, you usually aren't.
Right. In a conflict of interest, assuming benevolence is a catastrophic strategic error.
Catastrophic. Because by giving them everything, you accidentally signal that you have no defenses to protect anything else.
The absence of friction removes the structural integrity required to maintain a balanced dynamic.
Which forces us to look at the utility of this option. If total surrender invites further aggression, why is it ever chosen?
That's the million-dollar question. The text implies that yielding is only mathematically sound if the cost of the friction, the cost of actually fighting, is guaranteed to be exponentially higher than the cost of the additional kicks you're going to receive.
Right. Like if fighting back means literal destruction, then yielding is a survival tactic.
Exactly. But as a baseline strategy for managing just daily conflict, it is a trap.
A trap that manufactures future vulnerability.
Precisely.
So, if yielding is a trap that invites aggression, the logical countermove for someone trying to preserve their agency without engaging in an outright war is evasion.
Right. The instinct to just step away.
Exactly. If I don't surrender, but I also don't fight, I can just step out of the arena entirely.
But the source anticipates this instinct beautifully.
It really does. It introduces the second option, the complete refusal to make a decision.
And it defines this with a brilliant, paradoxical absolute.
I love this quote. The text explicitly states, absence of a decision is also a decision.
Such a powerful line.
It is, but I have to push back on this a little.
Okay, play devil's advocate.
Wait, if you do nothing, isn't that just a pause? How can the act of literally doing zero be classified as taking an action?
The text is echoing a fundamental tenet of existentialist philosophy here, actually.
Really? Getting philosophical. I like it.
Yeah, it's pulling heavily from the idea that we are, as Sartre said, condemned to be free. You cannot escape the burden of agency.
So even choosing not to choose is a choice.
Exactly. The fatal flaw in the evasion strategy is the assumption that the temporal reality of the situation hits pause just because your cognitive participation hits pause.
Ah, I see. Time keeps ticking.
Right. There is no stasis in negotiation. Life, business operations, and relationships are governed by the constant forward momentum of time.
So doing nothing isn't a pause, it's just letting things play out without your input.
Refusing to make a decision is the equivalent of dropping the steering wheel of a moving vehicle.
Wow, dropping the steering wheel, that's a vivid image.
You haven't stopped the car, right?
Uh,
You have simply made the definitive choice to let gravity, momentum, and the external topography dictate the coordinates of the crash.
Let gravity dictate the coordinates of the crash. That perfectly illustrates the weaponization of delay.
Which we see constantly in bureaucratic and institutional structures.
Oh, everywhere. Look at how large regulatory bodies or even just massive corporations handle complex approvals that carry political risk.
They rarely give a flat no.
Exactly. Instead of formally denying a request, which is a definitive action that triggers an appeals process or litigation or public backlash, they simply deploy strategic ambiguity.
Now you put the file in a drawer and conveniently forget about it.
Yes, the absence of a decision acts as a definitive no, but it shields the deciding body from the accountability and friction of actually vocalizing the no.
They maintain the status quo by paralyzing the process entirely.
It's so frustrating to be on the receiving end of that.
Well, strategic ambiguity is a highly effective, albeit deeply cynical, deployment of option 2.
Cynical is the right word.
By paralyzing the communication, you force the opposing party to carry the agonizing cognitive load of the unresolved conflict.
You make them do all the worrying.
Exactly. You essentially drain their resources, their time, their capital, their mental focus, while preserving your own.
But there's a danger to this, right?
A massive danger. This action of inaction is incredibly volatile.
How so?
While it protects you from immediate accountability, it breeds a unique, potent strain of resentment.
Worse than option 1.
Often, yes. Think about it. In option 1, where you force someone to surrender, there is at least closure.
Right. It sucks, but it's over.
Exactly. Option 2 leaves the other party in a suspended state of purgatory. And that sustained ambiguity often radicalizes the opposing party over time.
Oh man, I see this in venture capital negotiations quite frequently.
Oh, that's a perfect arena for option 2. Tell me about it.
So a startup founder is waiting on a term sheet from a lead investor. The investor isn't saying no, but they aren't saying yes.
It's a classic VC stall tactic.
Right. They are stalling, maybe waiting to see if a competing firm shows interest, or waiting for the startup to run out of runway so their valuation drops.
Bleeding the founder out.
Exactly. The non-decision is an active, aggressive negotiation tactic designed to let time erode the founder's leverage.
But, as we noted, it breeds intense resentment.
So much resentment. If that founder survives the runway crunch and manages to secure funding elsewhere, that original investor is permanently blacklisted.
They will never see another pitch deck from that founder again.
Never. The non-decision destroyed the relationship architecture just as thoroughly as a hostile act would have.
The realization that both yielding and evasion are active, often destructive choices, naturally pushes negotiators toward the necessity of mutual engagement.
Because you realize you can't just run and hide.
Right. If you cannot safely surrender and you cannot safely evade, you must step onto the board and engage with the opposing forces.
Which brings us to the third structural path identified in the source material, the mechanics of compromise.
Compromise. The golden child of diplomacy.
It really is, right? Compromise is deeply culturally ingrained as the moral high ground of conflict resolution.
We're taught from a young age that splitting the difference is always the right thing to do.
Always. But the text doesn't let us rest on that simplistic cliche. It dissects compromise into two highly distinct operational mechanics.
And this is where the text gets really granular and useful.
Yeah, so the first mechanic is mutual concessions.
Which aligns perfectly with the traditional idea of splitting the difference. You give a little, I give a little.
Right. But the second mechanic is much more complex, the asymmetrical exchange.
This is a fascinating concept.
It is. It's where one side yields in the present moment, but the other side takes on additional obligations.
That distinction right there is where the theoretical framework demonstrates its true sophistication.
Let's break that down for the listener. This is like deciding where to eat, right?
The classic couples argument. Let's hear it.
So mutual concession is picking a restaurant halfway between our houses. We both gave up something, the convenience of staying close to home.
Right. A perfect symmetrical split of the inconvenience.
But the asymmetrical version is I'll drive all the way to your favorite spot today, but my additional obligation is that you buy the drinks.
Okay, that is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Thanks. I mean, we do this every day without realizing it.
We do, because it acknowledges the human interaction rarely maps onto a perfectly symmetrical 50-50 split in real time.
Life just isn't that neat.
Exactly. Value is subjective, and crucially, it is temporal. Asymmetrical compromise operates on the understanding that concessions can be traded across different dimensions.
Specifically, the dimension of time.
Yes.
The concept of asymmetrical exchange is essentially the foundation of all contract law.
It absolutely is.
If we look at a massive infrastructure project, for example, a government doesn't just hand over $1 billion and simultaneously receive a finished bridge in the same exact second.
That would be magic, not construction.
Right. They execute an asymmetrical compromise. The government yields a massive amount of present capital.
They give up the money today.
Yep. And the construction consortium yields nothing in the present. They just receive the money, but they take on the immense additional obligation of labor, material procurement, and engineering over, say, a 5-year horizon.
The scales of the compromise are balanced, but that balance is staggered across time.
Staggered across time? I really like how you phrased that, but there's a risk there, right?
A massive risk. And that temporal staggering exposes the critical vulnerability of the asymmetrical exchange.
Because what if they don't build the bridge?
Exactly. It creates interpersonal or institutional debt. It creates a lingering entanglement.
A lingering entanglement. That sounds stressful.
It is. When you yield in the present based on the promise of an additional obligation being fulfilled in the future, you are essentially transitioning the conflict from a negotiation phase into an enforcement phase.
Oh, I see. You've stopped negotiating and started policing.
Precisely. If the enforcement mechanisms like legal contracts, social capital, regulatory oversight, if those are weak or non-existent, the asymmetrical compromise just collapses.
Because the other person has no incentive to actually follow through on their future obligation.
Right.
And if the enforcement fails, it retroactively mutates the interaction entirely.
Mutates it how?
Well, if I yield my capital today and you default on your obligation tomorrow, we didn't actually engage in option 3.
I see where you're going with this.
I was tricked into option 1, I completely surrendered, and I am highly likely to get additionally kicked because my capital is gone and I have 0 leverage remaining to demand the obligation.
Precisely the danger. It's a delayed fuse. Option 1.
That's terrifying.
This highlights exactly why identifying which flavor of compromise you are navigating is paramount.
You have to know what game you're playing.
Yes. You have to ask yourself, are you engaging in a mutual concession where the transaction is cleanly severed the moment the deal is struck?
It's splitting a pizza.
Exactly. Or are you engaging in an asymmetrical exchange where the deal merely initiates a prolonged period of vulnerability and debt management?
So why should the listener care? Because recognizing whether you are in a mutual concession or an additional obligation dynamic dictates how you enforce the agreement later.
Absolutely. But I have to point out, even the seemingly safe rope mutual concession carries significant hidden costs.
Really? Splitting the pizza has hidden costs.
Well, maybe not the pizza. But in higher stakes environments, yes. Our cultural conditioning dictates that splitting the difference is inherently fair, and therefore it must be optimal.
Right. Fair equals good.
But the text forces us to realize that fairness and effectiveness are frequently mutually exclusive metrics.
Mutually exclusive. So fair can actually be ineffective.
Often, yes.
Let me give you the classic geopolitical example of this.
Please do.
Think about the phenomenon of drawing arbitrary borders to settle territorial disputes, essentially splitting the difference geographically.
Ah, yes. Cartographic compromise.
Look at the Sykes-Picot Agreement, or the partition of various colonial territories throughout history.
The straight lines on the map.
Exactly. The powers involved engaged in mutual concessions. They drew straight lines on a map to ensure everyone got a mathematically fair share of the landmass.
You get 500 square miles, I get 500 square miles.
Right. But this fair compromise completely ignored the underlying cultural, ethnic, and economic realities of the regions on the ground.
Because the math was all they cared about.
Yes. And it led to decades of systemic instability and violence. Splitting the difference resulted in a fractured, mediocre solution that degraded the quality of the outcome for millions of people.
That is a perfect historical mapping of the concept. Mutual concession often degrades the utility of the final outcome because it relies on the dilution of both parties' optimal visions.
You're watering down the good ideas just to make everyone equally unhappy.
Precisely. You are essentially agreeing to jointly manufacture a suboptimal reality,
Both parties walk away with a solution that is structurally weaker than their original proposals.
bound together only by the shared dissatisfaction of having lost something.
That is a very grim view of compromise.
It is, but it's structurally accurate.
Okay, so let's track our progress here. If yielding invites aggression,
And evasion crashes the car.
and compromise results in either vulnerable debt or diluted mediocrity.
The psychological drive naturally gravitates toward outright domination.
Right. If the middle ground is a wasteland, the instinct is to push for the absolute peak.
Which brings us directly to option 4. The illusion of total victory.
The illusion of total victory. The source material describes this option as the most pleasant, completely getting your way.
And honestly, it is the most pleasant subjectively from a localized, immediate perspective.
I mean, who doesn't like winning?
Right. The neurochemical reward of total victory, the dopamine hit of complete domination and validation of your position, is intense.
It feels fantastic in the moment.
However, the text is incredibly deliberate with its phrasing here. Following the acknowledgement of its pleasantness, it immediately states, here too there are certain nuances.
I noticed that. The text just leaves that phrase hanging there like a guillotine.
Certain nuances.
Okay, getting exactly what I want sounds great. What could possibly be the nuance or the catch here?
To understand the catch, we have to run the architecture of the framework in reverse.
Okay, walk me through it.
If I achieve option 4, total victory, it means, by definition, I have forced my counterpart into option 1.
Ah, I have forced them to completely yield.
Yes. And we've already established the psychological fallout of option 1.
The loss of agency, the evaporation of boundaries, and the deep visceral sting of the additional kick.
Exactly. You're manufacturing a time bomb of resentment.
So the nuance the text refers to is the long-term systemic cost of short-term localized victory.
Yes. This is the concept deeply embedded in game theory, particularly in the study of iterated games.
Iterated games, explain that for the listener.
Sure. If you are playing a single-round game, say a one-off transaction, with a stranger in a foreign country whom you'll literally never see again.
Like haggling over a souvenir at a market.
Exactly. In that scenario, total victory is mathematically optimal. You extract maximum value and you leave.
If there's no tomorrow.
Right. But human interaction, business, and diplomacy, they're almost entirely iterated games.
There is always a tomorrow.
Exactly. You have to negotiate with that same partner, that same vendor, that same neighboring country again tomorrow, next month, and next year.
So when you achieve total victory in round 1 of an iterated game, you aren't just winning a point.
No, you are radically altering the environment for round 2.
I see this in office politics all the time.
Give me a scenario.
If I utterly crush a colleague in a debate over a project's direction, just humiliating them in front of the boss and forcing total capitulation.
You get your way. Total victory.
Right. But they do not magically adopt my vision with enthusiasm.
Of course not.
They walk into the office the next day operating as a covert insurgent.
A covert insurgent. That is exactly what happens.
They will look for every opportunity to undermine the project, delay deadlines, or sabotage the implementation just to regain the dignity they lost in that initial negotiation.
My total victory guaranteed the failure of the execution.
Exactly. It's self-defeating in the long run.
It is the defining characteristic of a Pyrrhic victory. The success comes with such a devastating cost to the collaborative foundation that it is tantamount to a strategic defeat.
A victory so costly, it's basically a loss.
We see this historically in the aftermath of major conflicts, where the victor imposes unmitigated, humiliating terms on the defeated party.
Do you have a specific example in mind?
The total victory of the Treaty of Versailles following World War I is the textbook example.
Oh, that's a brilliant pull.
The victorious powers achieved exactly what they wanted in the short term: crippling reparations and territorial annexation from Germany.
Complete option 4, total victory.
Yes, but the nuance was that this unmitigated victory created the precise economic and psychological conditions that radicalized the defeated nation.
And that directly fueled a far more devastating global conflict just 2 decades later.
Exactly. Option 4 poisoned the well for the iterated game.
So, relying on option 4 as a primary strategy requires an assumption of absolute permanent supremacy.
You can only safely extract total victory if you are entirely immune to the future resentment of the defeated party.
And in a highly interconnected world, absolute immunity is a dangerous myth.
Because leverage shifts.
Right. The junior employee you completely crush today might be the executive you need budget approval from in 10 years.
Exactly. It's a very small world, especially in specialized industries.
This brings us to a really profound impasse.
We're backed into a corner.
We really are. We have mapped 4 distinct structural paths, and every single one contains a fatal flaw.
Surrender breeds predation.
Evasion breeds paralyzing ambiguity.
Compromise breeds debt and mediocrity.
And total victory breeds insurgency.
It's bleak. If we are trapped within a zero-sum paradigm, where conflict is strictly about dividing a fixed amount of resources or power, these are literally our only options.
But the framework offers an escape velocity from the zero-sum trap.
It does, thank goodness.
Because otherwise this would be a very depressing deep dive.
It really would.
It requires a paradigm shift from dividing the pie to expanding the pie.
Yes, the expanding pie.
This is the pinnacle of the communication framework. Option number 5.
The Holy Grail.
The source defines this as the moment when parties utilize consensus technologies to arrive at a solution whose effectiveness actually surpasses the original proposals of each individual side.
The phrasing "surpasses the original proposals" is crucial. It's the key to decoupling option 5 from option 3, which is compromise.
Because compromise is just meeting in the middle.
Right. In a compromise, the final solution is mathematically inferior to the original desires of both parties. Like we said, 1 + 1 = 1.5.
We both leave a little unhappy.
But in consensus, the synthesis creates generative value. 1 + 1 = 3.
It's like mixing baking soda and vinegar.
Okay, I like this.
You take 2 totally separate things, bring them together, and it creates an entirely new, expansive reaction. It's not 1 + 1 = 2, it's 1 + 1 = 3.
Exactly. It is not about finding a middle ground. It is about discovering higher ground.
Higher ground. I love that.
But I want to focus intently on the specific terminology the text employs here. Consensus technologies.
Yeah, that phrase technologies is so deliberate, isn't it?
It is. When most people hear the word consensus, they imagine a very soft, organic process.
Like people sitting in a circle, exercising empathy, and slowly vibrating toward agreement through good intentions and trust falls.
Right, a very kumbaya moment. But the word technology strips away all that sentimentality.
A technology is an algorithm.
Yes, it is a systematic, repeatable methodology. It implies that reaching a synergistic solution is an engineered outcome, not an accidental byproduct of good vibes.
It frames consensus as an applied science.
And the foundational algorithm of this technology, the core mechanism you must deploy, is the systematic decoupling of stated positions from underlying interests.
This is such a massive concept.
It is a concept heavily utilized in advanced negotiation theory.
Let's break that down. Positions versus interests.
In any conflict, parties present positions. A position is what a party is demanding.
For example, I demand a 20% equity stake is a position.
We demand exclusive rights to this patent is a position.
But the underlying interest, however, is the why driving the demand.
Yes. It's the subterranean motivation.
The position is the armor. The interest is the flesh beneath it.
Oh, that's a great metaphor.
And if you attempt to negotiate based solely on positions, you are immediately trapped in the zero-sum logic of options 1 through 4.
Because positions are usually mutually exclusive.
Right. You either win the patent, you lose the patent, you avoid the patent dispute entirely, or you split the patent rights in a mediocre compromise.
Precisely. You are stuck dividing the pie. The technology of consensus is the rigorous process of information discovery required to unearth those interests.
So how does that work in practice?
Let us look at a high-stakes, real-world application of this. Consider the intense intellectual property wars in the early days of the smartphone industry.
Oh man, those are brutal. Apple, Samsung, Google, everyone was suing everyone.
Major tech giants were locked in existential legal battles, spending billions demanding exclusive injunctions against competitors' devices.
Trying to get each other's phones banned from entire continents.
Exactly. Those are their stated positions. Total victory in court. Option 4.
And if they had stayed entrenched in those positions, they would have destroyed the velocity of mobile innovation entirely. They were burning all their capital on litigation instead of engineering.
Exactly. But eventually, they deployed consensus technologies.
They realized they couldn't keep fighting forever.
They dug down to the underlying interests. Company A's interest wasn't actually to destroy Company B.
Right, they just wanted to make the best product.
Yes. Company A's interest was to ensure their own devices had the best possible display technology. Company B's interest was to ensure their devices had the most fluid touch interface software.
So once those underlying interests were exposed,
They abandoned the zero-sum litigation and engaged in massive, complex cross-licensing agreements.
that is brilliant.
It is the ultimate 1 + 1 = 3.
So Company A gets access to the touch interface, and Company B gets access to the display tech.
Yes. And the resulting smartphones they both produced were infinitely better than what either could have built, using only their siloed patents.
The effectiveness of the solution literally surpassed the original proposals of simply hoarding their own IP.
The market exploded, and the pie expanded massively for everyone.
That is incredible, but it's not easy to do, is it?
Oh, not at all. It requires immense cognitive effort and a high degree of emotional regulation to deploy this technology.
Because your ego gets in the way.
Exactly. You have to temporarily suspend your ego's desire for the pleasantness of total victory in order to engage in the heavy lifting of information discovery,
You have to be deeply strategically curious about the entity that is opposing you.
instead of just trying to crush them.
It's the holy grail of communication. So I want to challenge you, the listener, to elevate your arguments from compromises, which is just figuring out who loses less to consensus. What new value can we build together?
It's a beautiful thought.
But just as the text seems to hand us this utopian algorithm and tell us to go forth and synergize the world, it violently pulls the rug out from under us.
It really does. It's quite the plot twist.
It grounds the entire theoretical framework with a brutal dose of realpolitik.
The source poses a final, summarizing question.
Right, it asks, which of the options for decision-making is the most interesting?
And the answer it provides is the ultimate curveball.
It says, the answer is not so obvious. It all depends on your resources of influence over the other party.
This completely upends the expectation of a neat, moralistic conclusion.
Hold on, we just spent all this time establishing that option 5 consensus, expanding the pie, generative value, is the absolute pinnacle of human interaction.
The Holy Grail, as you said.
Right. Why isn't option 5 automatically prescribed as the correct choice in every single scenario?
Because, as we established at the very beginning, the text is not a manifesto. It is a tactical manual.
Right, it's bare metal pragmatism.
It recognizes that while option 5 is theoretically optimal, it is practically dependent on a highly specific structural environment.
What kind of environment?
Consensus requires a relatively balanced distribution of power and a mutual willingness to engage in the technology.
If one side refuses to engage, you can't force a consensus.
Exactly. If you lack what the text defines as resources of influence, aiming for consensus is not just naive, it is actively dangerous.
Resources of influence is a fascinatingly broad term.
Let's unpack it.
We often just use the word leverage, but influence encompasses so much more than immediate brute force.
Absolutely. In negotiation theory, this is often mapped against your BTNA.
BATNA. Best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Right. What is your reality if this conversation completely collapses?
Your influence is directly proportionate to the strength of your BTNA.
Yes, but resources of influence go beyond just alternative options. They include material capital, hierarchical authority, exclusive information, and critically, as we discussed earlier, the dimension of time.
Time is huge. If I have 3 months to negotiate a deal and you have 3 hours before you face bankruptcy, my temporal resources of influence over you are absolute, regardless of our respective BTNAs.
Exactly. Influence also includes intangible emotional capital, reputation, and simply the ability to withstand friction.
Who can hold their breath the longest?
Right. So we have to map the 5 options onto this fluid spectrum of influence.
Let's do that. Let's look at the extreme low end of the spectrum.
Okay.
Let's say you have absolutely zero resources of influence. You are a junior associate at a prestigious law firm, drowning in student debt, with zero alternative job prospects.
Your BATNA is terrible.
Horrible. And a senior partner demands you cancel your highly anticipated vacation to review documents all weekend.
Ouch.
Your position is, I want to go on vacation. Their position is, you will work.
In that environment of extreme power asymmetry, attempting to deploy consensus technologies, option 5, is a critical miscalculation.
Right. If you sit down with the senior partner and say, let's explore our underlying interest regarding my weekend labor to find a generative solution, you are profoundly misreading the structural reality.
It sounds almost comical when you say it like that.
Because it is. The partner's interest is simply the extraction of your labor, and they have the absolute hierarchical influence to compel it.
Your attempt at consensus will likely be viewed as insubordination, and you may be fired.
So what do you do?
In that specific, highly constrained context, option one, total surrender, is actually the most rational, strategic survival tactic.
Yielding to survive.
Yes, you yield the weekend to preserve your employment, while simultaneously recognizing that you must work quietly in the background to build your resources of influence.
Like updating your resume and securing a stronger BT&A.
Exactly. So you are never forced into option one again. The text is validating surrender not as a moral failing, but as a temporary tactical necessity when influence is absent.
That makes total sense. Now, conversely, let us examine the extreme high end of the spectrum.
Okay, let's flip it.
What if you possess overwhelming, absolute resources of influence over the other party?
If you are the senior partner, basically.
Well, exactly. Or say, if I hold a monopoly on a critical resource, like my company is the sole manufacturer of a specialized semiconductor that a massive tech conglomerate requires to launch their flagship product next week.
Your influence is virtually absolute.
Right. Their BATA is a failed product launch and billions in lost market cap. They have to buy from me.
In that scenario, while you could dedicate the time and cognitive resources to engineer a consensus,
Pragmatically, option 4 total victory becomes the most efficient path.
yes, you dictate the pricing terms entirely. You extract maximum value.
But what about the resentment?
Yes, you trigger the nuances of resentment we discussed earlier. But if your influence is so absolute and your competitive moat is so deep that their resentment cannot mathematically harm you,
Then option 4 is a highly viable strategic choice.
exactly.
Although I would argue that even with absolute leverage, relying on option 4 carries a shadow risk.
I agree. Leverage is dynamic, not static.
Right. If I extract total victory and completely crush the tech conglomerate on pricing today, their resentment becomes a catalyst.
They will remember what you did.
They might pour $1 billion into R&D to develop a proprietary alternative to my semiconductor, simply to destroy my monopoly and regain their agency.
I will spend $1 billion just to never have to talk to you again.
Exactly. Total victory today often funds the research for your destruction tomorrow.
That is a critical observation. Power dynamics are in a state of constant flux.
They never stay still.
The resources of influence you hold today can evaporate tomorrow based on macroeconomic shifts, technological disruption, or just the sheer willpower of a resentful adversary.
Which brings us back to why option 5 is so special.
Right. This is precisely why option 5 remains the most robust and sustainable long-term strategy, assuming you possess the baseline influence necessary to compel the opposing party to engage in the process.
Because consensus builds resilient systems, whereas total victory builds fragile empires.
I love that phrasing. It perfectly encapsulates the entire framework.
The ultimate synthesis of this framework is that successful communication is an act of relentless dual diagnosis.
Is diagnosis.
Yeah, it is not enough to simply diagnose the nature of the conflict, like whether you are fighting over positions or exploring interests.
That's only half the equation.
Right. You must simultaneously and ruthlessly diagnose your own resources of influence relative to the other party at that exact moment in time.
Because your influence dictates your options. The best choice is entirely contextual.
The text gives you the architecture.
But you must measure the physics of the room before you decide which door to walk through.
Exactly. This has been a truly paradigm-shifting breakdown of how humans operate under pressure.
It really changes how you look at every conversation.
Let's briefly recap the architectural blueprint we've just unpacked for the listener.
Let's do it.
We started with option 1, the trap of total capitulation, revealing how the absence of friction signals weakness, creates a power vacuum, and invites the other party to additionally kick us.
Then we move to option 2, the action of inaction, exploring how strategic ambiguity and the refusal to decide is a heavy, active choice to drop the steering wheel and force the cognitive load onto your counterpart.
Then we dissected option 3, the mechanics of compromise, differentiating between the dilutive mediocrity of mutual concessions and the hidden dangers of asymmetrical exchanges that create lingering interpersonal debt.
And we analyze option 4, the illusion of total victory, exposing how dominating an opponent in an iterated game manufactures a time bomb of resentment and future insurgency.
We then explore the escape velocity of option 5, deploying consensus technologies to dig beneath stated positions, unearth underlying interests, and construct a generative reality that expands the pie for everyone.
But we anchored it all to the ultimate variable, your resources of influence.
The hard truth that your capacity to choose your path is strictly governed by the leverage, capital, and time you possess relative to your opponent.
It transforms communication from a reactive emotional reflex into a proactive strategic discipline.
So I want to leave you with a new analytical lens for your own life.
A takeaway for the listener.
Exactly. The next time you find yourself locked in a disagreement, whether you are feeling the heat rise in your chest during a high-stakes board meeting or just having a tense conversation at home.
Before you default to your habitual response.
Yes, before you blindly pick one of these 5 paths, I want you to stop, take a breath, and ask yourself the most critical question of all. Am I accurately measuring my resources of influence right now?
It's the question that dictates everything else.
Because choosing the seemingly peaceful outcome of surrender when you actually possess the leverage to demand consensus is a tragedy of missed potential.
And conversely, choosing to fight blindly for total victory when you have absolutely zero structural influence.
That might just be the exact reason why your interactions are constantly resulting in you getting kicked.
The architecture of the conflict is already built.
Your only job is to figure out exactly where you are standing on the board.